Welcome to Ohio Roots, the official podcast of the Ohio Genealogical Society. Join us as we embark on a captivating journey through Ohio's rich genealogy, history, and abundant resources. Hosted by me, OGS Executive Director Noel Poirier, this podcast brings you insightful conversations with a diverse array of guests, from OGS members, chapter leaders, and staff to renowned genealogists, historians, and influential figures within the genealogical community. Each episode delves into fascinating topics and captivating stories. So grab your headphones, hit that play button, and join us on this enthralling journey of Ohio's roots. Today's episode of the OGS Ohio Roots podcast is a bit different. My guest today is meteorologist Jen Narramore of the website tornadotalk.com, and she is joining me today to discuss an ambitious project called the Virtual Tornado Memorial Project, and how we, the genealogical community, can contribute to documenting historic tornadoes and their impact on the communities where they've occurred. I hope you enjoy my conversation today with Jen Narramore and are inspired to contribute your family's tornado story. Well, Jen, thank you so much for joining me today for the OGS Ohio Roots podcast. It's not often I talk to a meteorologist on our podcast. I usually am talking to genealogists or historians or librarians or any number of other professions. So this is kind of exciting for me. If you don't mind, I'm going to start you with a question I ask all of our guests. Usually I want to know how you got into what it is you do.
All right. Now, that's a good question. Thank you for having me here.
Sure.
I'm thrilled to speak to your audience about what we're doing. But yeah, I am a meteorologist. I became interested in weather when I was in middle school. We lived in Florida at the time, and I was fascinated with hurricanes. You know, they kept coming to the Florida coast, and then they would turn north, and I'm like, all right, what's going on here? So I was going to go to Florida State and do tropical weather, and then we moved to Pennsylvania, and I ended up going to Penn State, top meteorology school in the country, and graduated in 1995 with my meteorology degree. And I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. I was looking at media. Right. And it was really tough to try to find my way through the media landscape right out of college. So I actually worked as an administrative assistant and did other things for a little while. And then I got an opportunity to work at the Weather Channel in the radio network back in 1997. And I have been a radio broadcast meteorologist since that point. I still do that today. I'm no longer at the Weather Channel, but I am working from home, and I do radio station weather.
Okay.
I do a few stations here in the state of Ohio, but across the country. And so that's how everything kind of got started. But I've kind of switched my interest from hurricanes to tornadoes over the past few years.
What was what's the impetus of looking specifically at tornadoes as opposed to other things?
There's something about tornadoes. I think it's the sudden, it's just something that suddenly happens in your life, and they're violent, but they're also intriguing. They're intriguing to learn about. They're intriguing to learn about the science of them. They're also intriguing to learn about the social science aspect and how it impacts, communities.
Sure.
And so that is kind of what drew me into this. And it really became an interest in 2016 when Tornado Talk, the little company that I'm a part of that I own, got started as a podcast, and we started telling tornado stories. Okay. And that's where, and I started really diving into the research and quickly became an amateur tornado historian as I started diving into these stories. And I just became more and more interested in, why do they form? What happens? How are communities impacted? How are people impacted, with these major events? And I think it's, all events, weather-wise, whether they're hurricanes or flooding, or can be catastrophic. Right. There's just something about the tornado, I think, that just lives in the minds of folks for decades later. And I really think it's because it happens so quickly.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I that's what I was going to say. It seems like, a hurricane, it's coming, a flood may happen quickly as well, but you do have time to prepare for those typically. A tornado can happen in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, which can be very frightening. Genealogists often talk about, birth, marriage, death, these kind of key dates in people's lives. And I can also see how experiencing something like a tornado would also be an indicator on that timeline for people.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that, again, it's just tragic, and it happens so fast. 1 minute you're going about your day, or you're settling in for the night, and the next thing you know, your house is being torn apart, and that you may have lost a loved one. And I think that it's just such a powerful event that sticks with folks, and for some people, they have a hard time talking about it even decades later.
Right. Now, one of the reasons I asked you to come on today is because of a project that you're doing through Tornado Talk called the Virtual Tornado Memorial Project. So describe for me what that project's about and what you're trying to accomplish with it.
You bet. And I appreciate that. And a little bit of some history. After we ended the podcast in 2017, I held on to Tornado Talk and became the owner of the brand. And we are just a very small team of right now it's two, sometimes an occasional third, but I'm the main person. I have a helper here who does a lot of writing. We both have full-time jobs, and so this is a labor of love. But we started doing a lot of writing, and I was doing it by myself. On this day in tornado history, I wanted to do a tornado per day across the country. Sure. And that has exploded since 2023 into more in-depth writing. And it's during that writing process that we really started falling more in love with the people in these stories. We wanted to find out more about who was lost during those events across the country, so we can remember them and share their story. But it's also, memorializing the heroes, the survivors, first responders, and the communities that have been impacted. But our goal right now is to try to find the names of what I've estimated to be at least 22,000 people that have been killed by tornadoes throughout the centuries, of tornadoes that we are aware of. There have been, plenty of documentation, not from the National Weather Service, but also from Thomas Grzulis, who is a tornado historian who wrote the book Significant Tornadoes. And he has gone back into the newspapers and found events throughout the decades and the centuries. And we're using that work to figure out, okay, where did the fatalities occur? We know the events for the most part, but we don't know the people stories. And that's what we're aimed to try to find. This will be something probably I'll do for the rest of my life, is to try to find these stories. And we're going to build this memorial on our website. We want it to make it very interactive, where folks can come and look up their state, they can look up their community. They can not only find the names of the people that passed away, but also get more information about the event. What happened? Where did the tornado start? Where did it end? Who were the people along the path? Did it hit a major metropolitan area, or did it hit the smallest community? It doesn't matter to us, which doesn't matter. We want to know every name across the country.
Well, and Ohio is certainly no stranger to tornadoes and those types of weather phenomenon. And so I'm curious, how can people who are listening contribute to that effort of kind of documenting this?
I fully see this as a crowdsourced effort, especially with genealogists. I can do all kinds of research on newspapers.com. I can go to libraries and history centers. I can look through books and what have you. In fact, I just made a trip not that long ago over to Newark, Ohio, to the Licking County Genealogical Society and their library. They were so great. And I found information of a fatality back in 1825 from one of the family stories. They had, the family trees, and there was the story right there. So I really believe that genealogical societies and history centers and libraries the folks who work in those type of entities and the genealogists who are very interested in their family trees will be instrumental in helping us to fill in the gaps, because this is their family. They'll be able to kind of lead us to what happened, and because we want to get the history right. And that's extremely important to us. I mean, just in the state of Ohio, I did a quick tally before I came on with you. Over 100 tornadoes have killed people in the state of Ohio. This is records began in 1950 with the National Weather Service, but this is before that too. The amount of fatalities from those 106 tornadoes, 531 people have been killed in the state of Ohio, and over 6,300 injuries. And so the earliest tornado that we know about in the state of Ohio was June 27th, 1812. And it actually killed 2 children. Tragically, and there were 20 that were injured, and it moved north of Dayton and moved southeast. It ended up in Greene County, and it was in the Ludlow Creek area. So I know the event, but I want to know those children. I want to know who were they, so we can remember them and honor their lives. I also feel, and I've had some experience too, working with people who are telling me their stories decades later. I'm sitting in the room with them, and it's the first time they've ever shared their story.
Sure.
And so I believe that there's a sense of healing that can come too when people share their story, because ultimately they want to be remembered. And I think that's why people do genealogy. They want to know their family roots, their family history, and an event like this is a huge part of it. And so I think that if folks can share with us what they know, it would just be instrumental, because I'm only one person. I've got one other person. We could have a crowd of people across the United States helping us. It would be amazing.
Well, and I know, you're collecting stories, obviously, but I know at least with the Ohio Genealogical Society, we have a collection called the Ohio Photograph Collection. And I know within that collection, there are examples of natural disasters like tornadoes that there are photographs of. Is that something else that you're kind of seeking out as part of this project?
Absolutely. Yeah, because we'll start. We've written a lot of stories, and we've kind of gone to the point where, like, we're working on a story now that's taking us many, many months to get through. We're going to start small with a memorial and just try to find the names of the people. And then we're going to build from there, build their story. So we will constantly be collecting, stories, documents, photographs, oral history. If people have video or audio, maybe they've recorded a family member telling their story. This is all stuff that we would love to have on our website to be able to tell the story, where anyone can click on a button and go to this 1812 tornado and find out what happened there. I didn't know there was a tornado that occurred in Ohio then. What happened? Who were these people? And especially, in later events, if we can get any kind of photographs. I mean, the deadliest tornado in the state of Ohio is that Lorraine-Sandusky tornado that occurred back in 1924. 85 people were killed in that tornado event. And so I know that there's photographs out there of the damage from that. But the damage to homes and other places, businesses, is important, because that's a big part of the story, and the rebuilding the communities that were hit.
Hi, everyone. Noel Poirier here, Executive Director of the Ohio Genealogical Society and your host for the Ohio Roots podcast. Did you know you can help preserve the past and empower the future? Your donation to the Ohio Genealogical Society helps protect vital family history records and supports research for generations to come. Visit www.ogs.org/donate and give today. Thank you so much for your support. If you enjoy listening to the Ohio Roots podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could go to whatever platform it is that you listen and give us a good review. Reviews help us get more listeners and reach more people with Ohio Roots and what we're trying to do with the Ohio Genealogical Society. So please leave us a nice review, and thanks for listening. I think that's one of the challenges. You talked about folks who may not have shared their story before, and whenever we talk about people with personal trauma, the suddenness of a tornado and the quickness with which it takes somebody away from your family, I imagine, can be quite a traumatic thing for people to even try to talk about.
Absolutely. It's and it can be decades later, they're in tears or unable to speak about it. And there was a couple that I talked to in Murphy, North Carolina, that they were hit with an F4 back in the April 3rd, 1974 super outbreak. And that's the one that caused the Xenia F5 here in Ohio. And there were 148 tornadoes in a 24-hour period. And this couple
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's one of the worst outbreaks. This couple came to speak to me at the museum, and they were the sweetest couple. They had never shared their story. They lost a 2-year-old daughter. She was pregnant and was 9 months pregnant, lost the baby, and then Frank lost his mother. And she lived 4 miles east of them. So she was killed by the tornado well away from where they were in their home. And you could just see the emotion. And Frank looked at me and he goes, "We've never shared this story before." But there was also a sense of peace, I think, because he shared and he knew that I cared.
Right.
And I think that you can't rush people to share. But eventually, if they want to share, they will share. And I think there is a sense of relief. And I think that if it just really helps, I think brings a sense of peace. Because they now know that we're going to remember their kids and his mom.
when you're researching a historic tornado, particularly, what are the clues you're looking for in, say, a newspaper account from the 1850s that tell you that what somebody experienced was a tornado, even when they may not use that word?
We look for other words. Whirlwind is a big
Right.
one.
Right.
Cyclone
Yeah.
is a big one. Sometimes they called it a hurricane.
Sure.
And sometimes they did call it tornado, but that was not, they may call it like a fierce wind.
Right.
It
Okay.
could very well have been just a wind event, but
Right.
there are some clues in the way that they describe the damage.
Okay.
And then when you start plotting things out on the track, you could actually, possibly get some indications of the depth of it. The good part about what we're doing is that some of that research has already been done by
Okay.
Thomas Grzoulis.
Okay.
We call it the Big Green Book. Now he's got his blue books, or two books.
Okay.
He's documented all this. He's an amazing, amazing person. He's still with us today, and he's working
Great.
on his second blue book.
Okay.
It's called Significant Tornadoes. I'll
Right.
plug that all day long, but he is my hero, and I finally got to meet him last year, and we were like two peas in a pod, and he documented all of this. And so, but there are still some cases where he could only do so much. He was doing it by himself, going to libraries in the 1980s, looking at microfilm, reading every story.
Yeah.
And he could only capture so much. And he was not able, as much as he wanted to, he could not capture the personal stories. He mainly stayed with the statistics.
Yeah.
So, but I still will run across cases where there's indications that there may have been a tornado, and we can document that. And whether it was a whirlwind, damaging wind event, or a tornado in the 1800s, I think that it's worth looking at and analyzing to maybe capture that, especially if it seemed like it had a big impact on a community's economy or something, and then it had a big impact on somebody's life.
Right.
Looking at those events is important.
I'm always fascinated when I'm speaking to folks who do research that there's always this one person out there who's basically done all of the groundwork on which a whole group of other individuals are building them, their interest and their level of expertise. That's pretty fascinating. Talk to me real quick about where folks can go to learn more about the project and more about what you're trying to accomplish.
You bet. Yep. Our website is tornadotalk, TALK.com. And we have a link all about the virtual tornado memorial. And you'll see it. There's like a little red flashing button that says, hey, come visit me. This is what we're doing. And it kind of outlines what our goals are. Again, this is going to be, a multi-year project to try to find the names of folks. I think it'll be, I don't want to say easier, but it's a little easier to find some of the names, or maybe over the past 40, 50 years.
Sure.
It's pre-1950. And when you start going back into the, 1800s and the 1900s, it gets really, really tricky and to try to find names. And I think this is where I think genealogists are going to be just huge in helping. But it kind of outlines our goals, who we are, what we've been doing, and why this is important to us and what we're looking to do. And I think we're going to start small and build some of these bigger stories. We want it to be interactive with more detailed mapping. We map everything. We map the path so people can see the communities. We want it to be more interactive. We are currently, I have a full-time job, and so does Zach, who is my main writer and researcher on this project. We are crowdsourced through Patreon for the most part. So we do other content. We do a lot of writing, but we also I'm on Spotify with some tornado history. Okay. And so we provide other content, and then we have the Patreon support. We're also we can receive support through our PayPal as well, or check is how we kind of keep things going, because this is while this grows, our website is going to get very full very quickly. So but we want the content, so we want to keep building it. So we're probably going to have to increase some of those costs to keep things flowing, because we don't want it to be bogged down for folks when they come on the website. We want them to be able to get places quickly. And so we'll be building the website from there. And it's really a labor of love, but I want to be able to do this more and more as much as I can to keep this growing. So there's, all of our summaries are on there, all of the information. You can go back and read what we've written about the Xenia tornado from 74 or those type of things. All of the old podcasts are on our YouTube channel. And we actually did an interview and did a story on that Lorraine Sandusky tornado. It was one of my favorite episodes that we did back in 2016. So, but yeah, that's how you can find it. Also, you can email us. We have a dedicated email for the project, memorial@tornadotalk.com.
Okay.
And that will funnel in. We're only really wanting to get memorial type information that way. And that could be stories, connections, ideas, photographs, names. And we want more than just the names. We would love the names, surnames, nicknames, ages. That gets tricky too. How old was somebody when they passed away? Their birth, their death date, and any circumstances around. The other aspect I wanted to mention too, why this is important. This is actually important for the National Weather Service.
Okay.
So as we're gathering this research, we've created a huge database that we're filtering information in. This is important to know. Where were folks when they died? Were they trying to take cover?
Sure.
Did they get a warning? Did they look to the sky and knew something was happening? Were they trying to get to the basement? Were they, actually in a shelter and still lost their lives, or were they in a car? All that social science information is very important to the National Weather Service for safety, because what we can learn from the past to help us prepare for the future.
Right.
It's really, really important to kind of help communities, know how to keep their families safe moving forward.
Well, I think one of the great things about reaching out to the genealogical community is that we are so focused on our small communities in which our families lived, that we have kind of a shared knowledge of those communities that's pretty expansive. Jen, thank you so much for joining me today on the OGS Ohio Roots podcast. It's a fascinating project. If you have tornado stories or tornado family members you want to share along, be sure to visit her website. I'll definitely leave that at the end here. And Jen, thanks again for being here today. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for letting me share.
Our pleasure. Thanks again. I am always amazed at the number of different connections there are to our efforts at documenting our family history. But I did not have the history of tornadoes on my genealogical bingo card. It's a fascinating and worthwhile project, though, to contribute family histories to. You can learn more about the virtual Tornado Memorial Project at the website tornadotalk.com, and can send your family tornado stories to them using the email address memorial@tornadotalk.com. Thank you to Jen Narramore for joining me today on the OGS Ohio Roots podcast. You can listen to all of our past episodes at www.ogs.com/podcasts. And as always, thank you for listening.
The Ohio Roots podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Genealogical Society, the premier gateway for discovering your Ohio family history. Hosted by OGS Executive Director Noel Poyer and edited by Luke Poyer. Theme song is Beautiful Ohio, recorded by Bob Stanley and his orchestra in 1944. To learn more about joining the Ohio Genealogical Society, visit www.ogs.org.